Welcome to Practicum Q&A. I have to use a microphone because we're taping this for those of you that weren't able to make it to the physical space here, but those of you that did get here, thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to see as many faces here because this will make your life in this program, when you get to Practicum, so much easier. I don't even know how to emphasize that. There's so much information, and it can feel overwhelming with what is Practicum, what are the rules, what are the California regs. So the more that you get to be around the information, the more we get to dialogue about it, the less scary it is, and then the more it's like, oh yeah, it's not so bad. It's actually not that complicated. So thank you for being here. GSA is sponsoring this, and so please send your thanks to them. The food, the setup, everything. Very well done. And your GSA is also asking that you sign in. So if you haven't had a chance to sign in, just take a moment to go ahead and sign in. So I'm Jean Riley-Udomsky. I'm a lecturer here, and I'm also the Practicum director. I've had a lot of you in my 317 class, and I've also briefly met with some of you, and not so briefly met with some of you, but one of my responsibilities here is overseeing our Practicum program. And basically, does everybody here know what Practicum is? Yeah? Anybody doesn't? And that's actually a really okay question. So Practicum is what some places, states, schools call your fieldwork. It's your traineeship. It's your opportunity to take everything that you've learned in all of your classes, all the theory, all the clinical skill, application practice that you've done with each other, to actually take it out and to be trainee and to practice as a therapist. It's, in my opinion, the best part of the program. Because you sit in class right now, you practice with each other, you reflect on who you are and how you are, and then you get this awesome experience at the end of your time as a student to go and practice with tons of support. You have support here at the school, you have a class that you go to, a 333 practicum class, you have a supervisor out at your site, you have all your faculty here, you have me to be available to you to help you be as successful as you possibly can as you become a professional and a therapist. So for me, this is this is the best time. And I also know that this can be a really scary time because in a classroom, taking tests, you might be really good at paperwork, and then all of a sudden you're out sitting in a room, sitting with somebody across from you, and you're doing this thing called therapy. And what is that thing called therapy? And you read about it, and you practiced it, and now you might even have had it, and now you're the person actually providing it. So with that, I'm going to go over a couple different things today. First off is just make sure everybody in here is on the 90-unit track. Anybody on 51 unit or 78 unit? Okay, great. Because one of my very special requests of you is not to cross-consult with each other. We, in our program right now, State of California made some changes, and so we have a couple different tracks occurring. So we're what you could call a hybrid program at the moment. We have a 78-unit track, we have a 90-unit track, and then we have this other master's called a 51-unit. And if you cross-consult with each other, you might exchange information that's not accurate for your track. And so it's one of the reasons why we have this divided up into two segments today. And I'll ask when you leave here to speak about Practicum in reference to your track. I'm on the 90-unit Practicum track. I'm on the 78-unit Practicum track, or I'm on the 51-unit Practicum track. Okay? Any questions about that? Right? Okay, so anybody here on an MFT LPCC combined track? Anybody here on LPCC alone? Okay, all right. Good for me to know because we're going to talk a little bit about what Practicum is and what the Board of Behavior Science, which is also frequently called as an acronym BBS, says we can do in Practicum. Practicum, as I stated before, it's your time where you get to get out and you get to practice under the guidance and supervision of another licensed person. That can be a licensed marriage and family therapist, a licensed clinical social worker, or a licensed psychologist. And it's your time in the state of California right now, where as a trainee, which is a pre-mastered individual like yourself, that you actually can start collecting hours if you're on that MFT track towards license. Does everybody know a little bit about that? Okay, great. So basically, just so you understand why there are 3 tracks, there's a date that's pretty significant, and the date is before August 1st, 2012. So everybody here probably started the program after August 1st, 2012. That's the big distinction. The state of California changed the rules and changed the regs and said that here's what we want the 90-unit NFT LPCC to look like. And so you have fellow 78 units that were grandfathered in, and they have different rules, and the rules are a little bit less, and the regulations are a little bit less. The reason the state of California did that was primarily to make sure you're trained and prepared to serve the consumer, which is the people that you will be providing therapy to. So there are some core classes that you have to have done before you can start a practicum. And one of the handouts, did everybody get a chance to get handouts yet or not? Okay, cool. One of the handouts is this one, and it's called What is Practicum? And this one is specifically designed for you on the 90-unit track, and it lists the 9 core classes in addition to a remaining 5 classes that you have to take in order to be eligible for practicum. So if you're in your first year in the program, is anybody here in the first year of the program? Awesome, welcome. Anybody here in the second year of the program? Very cool. Anybody in the third year? Great. Who in the room is in practicum right now? Yay, thanks for coming. And so the group that has been in the program for 2 years, you're probably thinking about starting practicum next year, correct? And the first year folks that are in the room are probably planning for a couple years out, correct? Excellent. So that's really good that you're all here. It's a diverse, rich group because many people come to me in a panic and go, I was told I was supposed to meet with you, and I'm not exactly sure to talk about practicum and to make sure I'm eligible for practicum. And so this is our first conversation, our meeting about that, so you know when to come and talk to me specific to you enrolling in practicum. Okay, so you got the classes down that are required, and basically, from a process standpoint at Santa Clara, once you've moved through the program, and probably it would be your second year, maybe your third year, depending on your pacing, then you would start thinking about, I'm ready for practicum. I'm going to do the practicum fair. So has anybody ever been to the practicum fair before? Okay. Anybody want to share what that looks like?
So it's in one hall room, and there's a bunch of different tables with agencies who've come and put out a spread of their information, and it's a place where you can come and talk to them about your interest in their place and possibly set up interviews.
So basically, it's like a job fair, and it's huge, and it's good to come anyway, even if you're 2 years out, because then you kind of get an idea of questions like, they're not silly questions, but they come up, like, what do I wear? What am I supposed to do when I get there? What should I bring? How pushy should I be if there's 20 people at a table and I know that's the agency that I want to talk to? So it's good to come to the fair, get a layout of kind of what it looks like, how it's structured, who are the agencies that are here, and what am I watching my fellow peers doing in order to give them the resume and set up these interviews. Because how Practicum is structured is that we do a fair in January, you do interviews with those particular sites that you're interested and they're interested in you. They do job offers, traineeship offers, and then you start either in August or September, depending on the agency. And so basically from January to August, you're in that ramp-up mode for securing your practicum site. So those of you that are going to be doing practicum in September 2015, January will be your date, so you'll go to that fair. We just don't tell you, here's the fair, good luck. We actually set up a couple different workshops at the very beginning of January. We, this past year, decided to do a resume building workshop and an interview prep workshop. And we encourage all students that are going to be going to practicum fair to go to those, because interviewing for practicum is very different than interviewing for maybe other jobs that you've had. And your resume, which you might have or you might not have one, your resume might look very different as well. It's really can be a different experience when you're sitting down with an agency that you really want to be placed at, and they ask you questions such as, like, tell me a little bit about who you are. And you think, well, what do they want to know? Well, they might want to know who you are. Like, what's your life experience? Like, what do you bring to the table? Tell us a little bit about your belief about culture. Tell us a little bit about your multicultural experience. Talk a little bit about your family experience. I mean, those are all different ways of interviewing. Has anybody ever been to an interview like that before? Yeah? And how was it? It was good. Because it's in hospice. Because it's a more well-rounded interview about who you are as a person. It's comfortable. But getting comfortable with sharing information about yourself in a way that is not necessarily your therapy, right? Because they're thinking about making you an offer to be a trainee, the beginnings of a clinician. So how do you do that? So we practice that. We practice how to write your resume. We practice how to approach a table and communicate who you are and what you're looking for and what you should give them in terms of your resume and what you can expect in the interview process. Last year, 100% of all of our students were placed. So we've got a good track record. You guys do a good job getting sites. I hear constant feedback from our sites that you, Santa Clara students, are the most prepared students for Practicum. So when you get out to the sites, and I frequently refer to it as, it feels like jumping in a cold pool. I mean, you're like, okay, I've learned all this stuff, and now I'm just going to jump in. It's a cold pool, and heck, I hope I remember how to swim. And it's scary for you, but what the sites reflect back to me is your students swim. And so it's good to know that the prep that you're getting now and all the work you're doing in the classroom is going to wildly pay off for you when you're placed. So I've just covered a lot of information. Questions? And then we'll keep going. Comments? Everybody feel like they got it under control, no problem? Yeah? Yeah. Great question. I'll repeat it because I know we're taping. Okay, so basically if you refer to the worksheet or the handout that says, what is Practicum? And you see all the classes that you're supposed to take. And so you're wanting to go secure a site for September 2015, but you're not going to have all these required classes done. What do you do? So on the 90-unit track, depending on when you started in the program, like if you started in the fall on the 90-unit track, probably your courses are going to progress along where you'll have them all done. But let's say you started in the winter, then you might be short 1 or 2 classes. Depending on the class, I do make exceptions and approve students to start Practicum, but it depends on the class. And let me give you an example. So let's say you haven't taken 317 yet, which is child intervention, therapeutic interventions for children. And you go to the Practicum Fair and you secure a site, which many of our sites are child-focused, and you haven't had that class yet. You would then have to, before you could accept their offer as a trainee, to tell them that you won't have had the class when you start. You'll take the class, because that'll be your agreement with me, that you'll take it that first quarter of Practicum, in addition to Practicum, but it does put you in a bit of a disadvantage in the interview process. So that would be a conversation, like as you meet with your advisors now, which I strongly recommend that you meet with your advisors and lay out your course map. So here's what I'm taking now, here's what I plan to take next quarter, summer, session 1, session 2, and then Practicum. Go over that with your advisor to see if that's realistic, to see if the classes are offered enough for you, and that if you're going to be able to then come to me and say, Jean, would you please approve me to take 319, which is a common one that I approve, while I'm in my first quarter of Practicum. Does that make sense? Any other questions about that? Yeah. Okay, that's another excellent question. So I brought 2 boards that I'm going to just reference here in the back from the last 2-year Practicum Fair. And those are the sites that are approved by me and by the university as sites for you. And we don't approve anybody, and we make visits out to those sites. I make visits out to those sites. I make sure those are good quality sites for you to have as practicum. So let's say that you don't see an agency on there that you really want to be your practicum. Then you would want to come talk to me about that. And you'd want to say, you know, Jean, I live in Sacramento, and there's this organization that I absolutely love. It's a nonprofit. They've got licensed people that can supervise me. I'd love to have a conversation with you about seeing if maybe I can get that site approved for me. Does that make sense? So a little bit of a tricky thing to that, because I know our student body where you live is expanding. This is Santa Clara, located in Santa Clara County, South Bay. How many of you live outside of Santa Clara County in this room? So there's plenty of you. Anybody live in Sacramento? Anybody live in Oakland? San Francisco? Let's see, where am I missing? San Mateo? Where else? Monterey? Did I miss anybody? Okay, so you might say, you know what, these are agencies these are good agencies that we have, and these agencies have to work to come to us. So you might want to say, I'm just going to go with these, and I'm going to make it work in my life. Because you're going to probably spend, as you can see I have up here, 550 total hours if you're an MFT. So that means over the course of 30 weeks, right, because the practicum is 3 quarters, 10 weeks each quarter, you're going to spend about 18 to 20 hours at a site. So it feels like a part-time job. Some sites will ask for 24. Some sites might say 15 will be fine. What you've got to track is that at the end of your 30 weeks, that you have minimally 550 hours out of your site. So sometimes people work it out where you commute to wherever your site may be, or you take time before the fair in January, if you're a September 2015 practicum start, to secure a spot right now. And you would be having conversations with me about what you see in your local area or what agency you're really down into and you'd like to have that approved. Any other questions about that? Okay, so I'm going to move us along. I want to capture 2 data points which are also in the handout. These tend to be the most confusing. And don't worry about feeling like you have to digest this right now. You're going to hear this so many more times from me, to the point, hopefully, that you'll say, would you quit saying that? And then I'll be like, yes. So there are total 550 hours that have to happen out of practicum. If you're an MFT on the 90-unit track, 225 of those has to be face-to-face. So that's you providing clinical services to somebody. Of the 225, 75 can be client-centered advocacy. And I'll show you the definition from the state of California for what client-centered advocacy means. If you're the LPCC, you have 550 total hours, and of the 550, 280 have to be face-to-face. That's on your What is Practical handout as well. Okay, so, yeah. So if you're both the MFT, LPCC combined track, for practicum, you can count your hours both ways for fulfilling practicum at the university. On the LPCC track, none of those hours count towards licensure. So the state of California doesn't even recognize your work towards your license until postmaster. You still have to do a practicum in the state of California, and you still have to fulfill those level of hours, but they don't regulate it. They let the university regulate it and basically say you met your practicum requirements. Yeah?
So since we're taking 3 different quarters of practicum class, right?
Yep.
The classes care how many hours you fill during that 10-week period. So if you got 550 and you basically signing like a 12-month contract with an agency, those hours can be, you end up with 15 hours a week as long as, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So basically, because practicum is 3 quarters, 30 weeks, What if one quarter you get a whole bunch of hours and another quarter you don't get so many hours? Is that a problem?
Yeah, you work during vacation, all that.
Right. No, it's not a problem. Yeah, because basically at the end of your practicum time, which ideally, and this doesn't always count if you're 90 unit and you didn't start in the fall, so if you started in winter or spring, ideally practicum is the very end of your time here. All your classwork's done, you fulfill your practicum in June, you graduate, you go get a job as a mastered clinician. You make the big bucks. So that's ideally, okay? And so with that, you would then not have any classes that you'd still have to stick around and take. Does that make sense? Does that, yeah. You might. It depends on what, as you mapped out your courses with your advisor, how the program is structured. If you are on the 9-unit track and you start in the fall, it flows quite nicely. And then you can take summer to move things along if you're taking like the, the full load that you can take. If you have a winter or spring start, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it does set up the timing to be a little tricky for you because your practicum only can start in the fall. And so you can't start in the winter, you can't start in the spring, you can't hope that I'll offer it in the summer. It doesn't work that way. So, and you have to do 3 consecutive quarters in order to fulfill it. So you've done your 3 quarters, and you now want to, you're going to graduate, and you want to have me, which you absolutely will, there's a form I have to fill out for you. And it basically says that you fulfilled the total hours, which doesn't matter which quarter you got them in, going back to your question, that you fulfilled the total 550 and either the 225 or the 280 hours, depending on which track or dual track you're on. And that's a form that goes to the state of California. Does that answer the question so far? Okay, great. So let's talk a little about pre-practicum. Anybody here enrolled in my pre-practicum class right now? Okay, so does anybody know what pre-practicum is? So it used to be in California that if you wanted to, let's just say you've taken 18 quarter units and you're like, I want to start collecting hours now, and I'm not even in practicum. The state of California would let you do that as long as you and I were having conversations about it. Well, the state of California said no more. And so on the 90-unit track, in order for you to get pre-practicum hours, and that would be only if you're on the MFT track, because you remember it's trying to get more hours towards your license while you're still in the program, and on the LPCC track, you can't count those hours. So let's say you want to maximize your hours before practicum. The state of California says you have to be enrolled in a course. And the course, we designed it last year, is 330, and that's pre-practicum. And so let's say you're like, awesome, I'm going to go enroll in 330. Well, it's only really awesome is if you actually have a site secured already. And the students that typically, even the 78-unit students that could do it without the class, it's typically students that have jobs in mental health organizations, jobs that they secured with their bachelor's degree, but their employer said, look, we really like you. We want to retain you. We're willing to get this licensed marriage and family therapist over here to let you start collecting some hours pre-practicum. And then you come to me and say, my job wants to be my pre-practicum site. I want to do this. Do you approve? And can I enroll in your 330 class? Does that make sense? So unfortunately, I wish everybody could do pre-practicum. It makes sense because the more experience you have, the better you're going to be. But the California regs changed all that, changed the rules for us. Yeah. Yes, there are places that will do like where you could do teletherapy, and you can count those as pre-practicum hours if you enroll in the 330 class. Yep, and it gets even a little more complicated than that because the state of California regs are basically you have to be enrolled in the class, and then they'll give you 90 days after the class to not be enrolled and still count your hours. So it's expensive for you to pay for the class. So basically, let's say you took 330 in the fall, you have your site, maybe you're doing teletherapy at a crisis intervention, and then you collect all those hours towards licensure. I don't know how many hours that would be because there's a cap on teletherapy as well. Then you take a quarter off, because you have 90 days that the California gives you, and then you enroll a second time for the 330 class, so that you can count your full, let's say you started in the fall through spring as pre-practicum. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's complicated, and it's all California regs. So basically, if you feel like you've got a site that you can do pre-practicum, I think at this point, then we should have a conversation about it. Yeah.
So practicum starts in August, but then you don't actually start the 53 class until September when the fall quarter starts up.
Yeah.
Any hours that are needed in that interim before, I can take it to 0. They don't count towards the 550 that.
No, they do count, because basically there's another form that's over there, and it's called permission to enroll for practicum. And how we define practicum is when you're approved to start practicum, and there's a date on this form. The date that's on this form is the date that Santa Clara recognizes you starting your practicum and you can start collecting your hours. It's not actually the date you go to class. It's the date that you are approved to enroll in practicum. Make sense? So this form, having that date, is pretty important, having the right date. Because you're right, there'll be agencies, where are you placed at? And when do they want you to start?
August 11th.
Yeah, so Envision Shelter Network, August 11th start date. Which, there's the bonus is that you start collecting hours sooner. They probably, most sites, put you through several weeks of training before, which makes sense, before you're actually able to start seeing clients. And so, you might have been really anxious and excited to get going, and that just allows you to do that. Some sites don't start until September. That you will negotiate in your interviews after the practicum fair. Is that when you negotiated it?
Well, and then, so the same would hold for after I and continue in the summer, those hours don't count.
Yes, until you are registered as a intern. So you get your master's degree posted, which when you graduate, you're gonna be very highly motivated for this. You're probably actually gonna shoot me lots of emails saying, gee, is my degree posted, is my degree posted? Because the next thing you want is you want your degree posted so you comply for your Board of Behavior Science California intern number. And then you get to start collecting more hours with less supervision, and you can start getting hours faster towards your license. So there's a reason, of course, why you would want that, your degree posted and the paperwork done and your intern number from California as fast as possible. Are you guys staying with me, or am I getting too detail-oriented? I'm sorry? Yes, yeah. So postmasters is when you, I've joked around about big bucks. You actually can make really good money. And so many students have come to me and said, when I graduate, I hear I have to work for free. And I think I've probably heard that, I don't know, maybe like 300 times. And it's not the case. And I wouldn't encourage you to necessarily do that unless there's some place that only will offer you a free intern and that's where you want to be. The job market is so much better now than it was a couple of years ago. And you get to be in this really wonderful competitive place where you're going to graduate with your master's. You're going to have an opportunity to interview before your degree is even posted and potentially even secure jobs before you've even graduated. So that once you graduate, once your degree posts, once you have your intern number, you're already in, if you want, a salaried job full-time as a clinician 1 with benefits. I mean, it really is, the market has changed, and it's definitely in your favor. For those of us that hire clinicians, we wait until the date of graduation because we know there's a whole pool of you out there that we get to hire and to build new programs for. Make sense? Okay, yeah. It's up to you. It really is. It's something we have available. if you have a place that you can go get experience and licensed supervised work, and you can do it for 1 quarter, you can register for the class and do it for 2 quarters. It really is up to you. The tricky thing is you've got to have the site. So if you wanted to come to me and say, Gina, I need you to help me find a pre-practicum site, I don't have pre-practicum sites. I have practicum sites. I have tons of volunteer possibilities, but as an agency, it's not easy to secure those pre-practicum sites. Do you want to know why? Because you're earlier in the program than practicum, right? So if I can get a practicum student to come work for me in my organization that's in their last year of the program, they've had all their classwork, they're enrolled in the Santa Clara 333 practicum class, versus somebody that's a year earlier, less classes, less support, which one am I going to go with? I'm going to go over here. And so that's just Santa Clara. Think of every other school that's in this area that is a pre-practicum student you're competing against. So right now I have, I think, 3 students in the whole program drawing down pre-practicum hours. So it really is, and I think 2 of those are from their employers that said, we want to keep you, we want you to make a career here. What can we do right now to help that happen? Does that answer? And we can talk more. You can just come see me individually if that's really something you want to pursue for yourself. Yes? Okay. The question is, are you typically at your practicum site for a full 12 months or for 3 quarters? It totally depends. So when you go to the practicum fair, and we'll talk about this in the workshops preparing you for that, let's just say you only want to be at a practicum site for this many months. And you got to think about, like, if you walk up to that table and you say, hi, I'm really looking for a site for, 30 weeks, start, end, class time. Probably the site's going to be like, okay, do you want to know what we do? Of course you're not going to do that. But how do you find out what that agency wants from you? Do they want a year commitment? Most don't. Most want about 10 or 11 months, but some do. Some will want a full year commitment. Some sites pay stipend or an hourly. Most sites don't pay. So those are the other things when you come to the fair. The approved sites that we have, you're going to learn about which ones have some sort of financial package as well.
I would just add to that that you're going to be requesting a shorter amount of time than the agency normally offers. Then you're also going to be needing to ask for more clients to make up all the hours than the other interns that are going to be maybe in the same program, and that can be a challenging thing for the director of the agency to agree to.
Very good point. The more time you have out of a site, the more time you have to actually gain hours. Exactly. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. Any other questions about where we are right now? Yeah.
I'm a first year student, but I'm doing domestic violence and sexual assault compliance under that agency, and I'm wondering if my hours I'm doing now, I'm 2 years away from practicum, can be carried over into 75.
So basically, if you wanted your hours right now to count, you would be seen if you're eligible for pre-practicum. And if you're eligible for pre-practicum, you have to make sure you've had enough units done in the program, 18 units, and then you have to make sure that you have a licensed person out at that site that could supervise you, and that they're willing to sign off on those hours towards your license. You can't take hours that you're earning back here and apply them forward. Because basically, how the state of California sees it is your hours of license is you're working under somebody's license during that time, and they're approving and overseeing all your work. It's kind of like, like a basic supervision model. They're your supervisor. So anything you did 2 years ago, they didn't know you. Anything you're doing outside of their agency, they can't necessarily speak to, so those hours don't count. Question that frequently comes up is the class 333, which is a required 3-unit class that you take during practicum, starts in September, ends in June. You take the same 3-3 section, all 3 quarters. So your mapping out, your planning of your courses is pretty crucial there. That does not count as supervision. So as trainees, the state of California gives us a 1-to-5 ratio. 1 unit of supervision for every 5 direct hours. And so you might come to me, because you probably logically would think so, that why can't my 333 Santa Clara instructor be signing off on my clinical hours out at my site if I can get more hours? And they can't, because they're part of Santa Clara. They're not part of your site. They can't oversee the work that's happening on your site. Does that make sense? Good. Okay. So we just talked a little bit about the supervision as trainees. You're on a 5 hours of psychotherapy or counseling performed by you. The state of California considers that 1 unit. When you graduate and you're an intern, that becomes 10 hours. It's a 10-to-1 ratio. So there's another incentive to wanting to get that intern number because you can collect your hours quickly post-masters. Okay, so a couple dates. The Practicum Fair, for those that would be ready for it and wanting to start Practicum in September 2015, will be January 22nd, 4 to 6. If for whatever reason in your life you can't make that happen, that will be tricky for you because you'll have to reach out to agencies on your own by email or by phone calls and try to see if they'll set up an interview without meeting you at the fair. So if you're planning to start Practicum in September 2015, it is essential that you be at the fair because that's when you'll decide where you want to be and hopefully start setting up interviews. It moves very quick. So the fair happens in January, calls start happening a week later, interviews get set up for about 4 weeks. You will be very busy during that time. You'll be like, oh, I've got 8 interviews set up, or I've got 6 interviews, or nobody's called me yet, or I only applied to these 2 agencies and they haven't called yet. What do I do? It's a very hectic time for you. It works out. 100% of our students got placed last year. Different agencies have different time schedules for when they actually start the interview process. So just because these 2 agencies that you really want to be at, they haven't called you yet, doesn't mean they've passed you over. It means they probably haven't started their interview process yet. And so that's January 22nd. And then the Practicum classes will start in September, the first day of classes for fall 2015. And then if you're going to be in the class, fall 2016. Camp. Does everybody know? Go ahead. Okay, excellent question. On average, how many agencies do people apply and how many interviews? I would recommend that you apply to no less than 8. And so, so you'll go to the fair, I'd come with a stack of resumes and apply at least to 8. Interviews, out of, let's say if you apply to 8, probably you can expect, hopefully, 5 interviews. Best case scenario, you get 5 interviews, 5 offers, and then you're sitting frustrated about which one to pick because they all seem really awesome. Does that answer? Yeah. Yes. So it's a great question. So the question is let's say you start the process, your first choice doesn't call you, you get a bunch of offers, you are waiting for this one particular agency and you've heard that their process is a little bit later in the interviewing and offering. How do you handle that? Well, my recommendation is handle it like a job offer. If you've accepted an offer from an agency, my belief is that you're committed to that offer. This is a professional field, it's a small community. And so let's just say you're like, oh, I'll accept it, but if that other one calls me back, I'm gonna take the other one. Everybody talks. And so, it's not really in your best interest to do that. If there's an agency that you really want, then I would have an upfront, honest conversation and say, you know what, thank you for the offer. Is there any way that you can give me, 5 days, 2 weeks to really kind of sort through and organize all the other interviews that I'm having and all the other agencies? Is there any way that you could give me that? And if they say, nope, I need to know tomorrow, which some will. Some will give you 24 hours. And they know you're under pressure, and they know it's competitive. And they'll say, no, I need an answer within 24 hours. And you'll probably consult the people in your life that help you sort through those really difficult decisions. Some of you will call me and say, what do I do? And we'll talk about it, and then you'll make your decision. Do you accept, or do you say, I can't accept because I don't feel like I have a full grasp of all the different organizations to make my decision right now. I wouldn't necessarily say, I really want to be at New Horizons and they haven't called me back yet, so would you wait? Because then they're probably going to say no. Because just like a job, every agency wants to know they're the place that you want to be. And if they feel like your heart's not really in their organization and their mission, then they might not think it's going to be the best fit for them. Does that answer the question? It's a tough spot to be in, and it will happen for sure. Yeah. So Practicum is designed to be like a part-time. And so you can expect about 20 hours per week while you're in Practicum, some a little bit less, some a little bit more. I do not recommend students to do 2 Practicum. I think most of you are going to have to be taking classes while you're in Practicum. It used to be in our program, on the 78-unit track, you didn't take classes while you're in Practicum, and all of us faculty discouraged it because it's all-consuming being in Practicum. Not time-wise, 20 hours a week, 24, a 3-hour class, maybe that's 28, 29 hours, right? But the emotional part of it is all-consuming. And the ability to build within yourself that level of endurance, emotional endurance, and figuring out how you're going to maintain and take care of your compassion, and fight against compassion fatigue, it's really tricky. It's a really challenging, awesome, but challenging year, so I wouldn't advise it. Yes. So let's say that your course plan is going to require you to stick around and take classes. Yes, you have permission to take classes. You can walk, you take the classes, but your degree doesn't post until all of your requirements to meet your degree are all fulfilled. So I had a student this past year that was a little confused about that. They thought that when they walked and they fulfilled Practicum, they still had a summer class. But why couldn't they start getting their intern number from the Board of Behavior Science? And they were a little bit frustrated. And you can, because that intern number, you're only eligible once you have a master's degree that's posted, even though you fulfilled their Practicum requirement. So again, best case scenario, you get your coursework done and you walk at the end of Practicum. And there's a job incentive there too, because many of you are going to go out to your sites and you're going to be awesome. And they're going to want you. They're going to want to hire you. And it's much easier for them to offer you a job at the end of Practicum, knowing that you've fulfilled all your class requirements, and it's an easy transition to transition you from a trainee to an employee. Does that make sense?
The actual Practicum classes here in school, are they similar to other classes we're taking where there's, you're buying books, you're writing papers, all that? Or are they more process oriented? You can take back your experiences. It's more of a processing when you got it.
Yep. So the question is, the Practicum classes, like your traditional classes here, is it different? It's just like you described, it's different. It's process oriented. And so we have right now 10 Practicum classes, 10 instructors, and I would say all of them have them designed where you'll do a weekly reflection. You might do a presentation on maybe a client you're seeing in the class, which is very much more clinical about you as a therapist, how you're doing, and how your client is responding to you. It's a very small class. It's structured to be that way, that it can be one that you feel safe, you feel comfortable, and you can, as you're kind of working through, as I mentioned, that kind of emotional endurance and maintaining your level of compassion, is a place to be able to safely do that. Most students walk out of here feeling very connected to their Practicum class, feeling very connected to their practicum instructor and wanting to continue that kind of relationship. We see it as like it's like a safety net to help you through this tricky year. Other questions? Yes. I think you probably have to. If you map out your courses, I don't think you can get around it. You want to take as many classes as you can so that you have fewer during practicum. But I don't think there are many of you on the 9-unit track that can just do practicum. Yeah.
I'm sorry, just to follow up. You're not in a cohort though. You practice 3 practicum classes, are you? You need to say you have the same teacher.
Same teachers, same group. You're locked in. I'm so glad you brought that up again, because that can be a really wonderful thing, and it can also be a little bit frustrating when you're scheduling your classes. You're locked in. Once you get that first quarter class, you got to make sure that it's going to work for you all 3 quarters. And the class is designed to be that way. It's not designed to be where you move around, because they're going to just continue to develop on skill sets, core skill sets as a therapist, as a clinician, throughout all 30 weeks. Yeah? Well, you know, that's a great question. I would say, given that it's the South Bay, probably transportation would be pretty crucial. That would be one that you could pose at the practicum fair. Is, you know, would that be necessary? Most of the organizations we have, as many of mental health movement in general, is instead of people coming to your office and seeing you, the movement is getting out into people's communities and seeing people in their communities. And so that getting out, much easier to do in San Francisco, not so easy to do here in Santa Clara.
On the previous slide, you had the note about your own personal therapy hours counting by 3. Just curious, what would the BPS reflect from that?
Okay, wonderful question. It's like I could have just paid you $5. Okay, so the personal therapy. Okay, you don't ever, the minute you're in this program, you can start doing personal therapy, and those hours count towards licensing. You will never turn in anything to me or even say to me, Jean, I got, 100 hours of personal therapy. It doesn't get to count towards practicum, but it does count towards the MFT 3,000 hours. The only time you will submit something to the state of California, to the BBF, will be when you go to apply to take your licensing exam. There'll be a box, and you'll fill in your actual personal therapy hours. Only if the BBS was to audit you would they come back and say, what proof do you have that you had all these personal therapy hours? So my recommendation to you is see a personal therapist that's licensed. Get a copy of their license. Figure out a little system for yourself where you track down the dates you saw them and how long you saw them for, and then just bank it away. My other recommendation is, and you don't need to do it right now, but for those of you that are going to start in fall 2015, invest in a fireproof file cabinet. And because you see this lovely thing about the Board of Behavior Science, that it's with you from here on out. And so I have papers from the BBS that are really, really old, and I need them. If I were to move out of this state, which I did, I moved out of one state, Alaska, to California, and I needed all this old stuff. And so you too might be in a position in your life where you're going to need your practicum stuff 15 years from now. I have a graduate from 1995 asking me for her practicum stuff. And we don't have practicum stuff from 1995. She would have had to have saved all of that. So I would encourage you to start getting yourself organized from a BBS hour licensing standpoint.